Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. On this edition of the show, we'll talk to two authors who write books that include horror and mystery. We'll also hear music from one of my favorite singer-songwriters, Jody Raffoul. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, John Schlarbaum is a mystery writer from Amherstburg who has published a number of books. Those include 3 mysteries featuring private investigator Steve Cassidy. His newest release is called Abandoned and is the second book in the Jennifer Malone mystery series. Marty Gervais, publisher of Black Moss Press and best-selling author of the book Rum Runners, described John's first Jennifer Malone story as a murder mystery of immense talent. John Schlarbaum, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me today.
I'm delighted to have you here to talk about these books, especially your latest one.
Right.
But first of all, tell us a little bit about John Schlarbaum.
Well, I've been writing probably for the last 15 years. I started my own company called Scanner Publishing. I brought out a couple of small gift books, just sort of short stories, and then I started to get into writing full-length mystery novels. So I've been doing that part-time for about 10 years now.
And what do you do as a day job?
As a day job, I sort of have a lot of different things going on. I work as a patient transporter for Met Hospital in Windsor. I also still work part-time as a private investigator, which I've been doing for over 20 years now. Wow. And, authoring.
Yes.
There's a lot of me in the books.
Now that you tell me what you do, I can see that from everything that I've read in your books. This is so exciting. I want to get to the Jennifer Malone series, but tell us about your other books first.
The other books, I have 3 Steve Cassidy books. He is my ex-police officer, now sort of flawed private investigator. For people of a certain age, I like to think of him as a updated Jim Rockford from the Rockford Files TV show with James Garner.
And who didn't love Rockford?
Exactly. Yeah. And Steve's just a very low-key, low-tech type of investigator, but he's a throwback to the old gumshoes, and he looks into cold case files. So the twist on his books are the cold case files have actually already been solved. So somebody has been tried, convicted, and has been sitting in jail for 5 or 6 years, and now a loved one has come forward with a box of evidence, and they hire Steve to reinvestigate the case all over again. So it is really like the TV shows where cold case detectives or retired detectives pull a dusty box off a shelf and just start going over it again. And, it's knocking on doors, talking with people, and it's good old-fashioned detective work.
Yeah.
So
people love those old case stories.
Yes. So
yeah.
So do I. And the one thing about the 3 Steve Cassidy books is it's not about blood splatter. It's not about DNA. It really is putting pieces together that somebody overlooked years ago, or maybe somebody was railroaded. I mean, you see these type of cases in real life all the time, and I try to make the Steve Cassidy character and how he investigates it as easy to follow, and that anybody could do this type of work. He isn't doing anything special. He's not, getting into any kind of, data banks that, we wouldn't be able to get into. It really is just old-fashioned detective work.
So are you kind of like an old-fashioned investigator?
I guess. I've been doing it for a long time now. Yeah. I always say that Steve Cassidy is sort of my alter ego. But he gets in a lot more trouble than I've ever got into. But he has more fun. So I sort of live vicariously through Steve and I guess him through me. But yeah, it's when I start his books, I literally sort of think, if my boss were to give me this file, what would I do as an investigator first? Where would I go? Who would I talk to? What questions would I ask? And then the fiction takes over. But as the fiction takes over, I again think, if I had this clue, where would I go next?
It's really interesting the way you talk about that and how you lay it out, because I'd like to talk about Abandoned. And of course, it's got the reporter in it. Right. And I often cringe when I know a book is going to have a reporter in it, because we're usually not represented realistically. It's usually, some Hollywood attitude towards what a reporter is. But the way you lay out how you would investigate is really sort of the way we would lay out how are we going to tackle a story.
Right.
And so I would love to be Jennifer Malone, I have to tell you.
well, this is good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And again, somebody with your, experience in the news, the newspaper business and doing what she, is doing in any of the stories, like, that makes me feel, really good because I haven't worked in a newsroom before. I have worked as a private investigator. I have worked as a patient transporter, and this book, takes place. It starts in a hospital.
So tell us about it.
Well, Abandon, the very first line is, "Don't let them kill me."
I loved it. That is as profound as it was a dark and stormy night was.
Right. I hope it is. But there's a true story behind it. I was always going to be, it's been 6 years since the last Jennifer Malone book called A Memorable Murder. And this is a complete standalone book. And I knew I was going to write a second book, and it was going to be the next book I wrote. And I was sort of juggling different ideas in my head. And one day, as a patient transporter, I went into an elderly woman's room to take her downstairs for a simple hip operation. I walked in. I'll use her name Helga because that's the name in the book. But I came in and said, "Hi, Helga. My name is John. I'm here to take you down to the OR for your hip surgery." And she looked at me and she went, "Don't let them kill me." And I'm like, no one's going to kill you. We're just going to get you.
That's not the plan.
It's not the plan as far as I know. But I talked to the nurses, I got Helga on a stretcher and talked to the nurse, and the nurse basically said, well, she's, I think, very nervous, and the surgery is supposed to be happening a couple days ago, and she's, probably, hopped up on pain drugs and stuff. She's just kind of confused. So I took this lady down to the OR as normal as I do every day. And again, just before I left, she says, "You promise you won't let them kill me?" And I go, "I promise nothing will happen.
Wow.
Everything will be fine, Helga." And I walked out of the OR and I left her there to have the surgery. And as far as I know, the surgery went well. She's alive. She has a great new hip. But when I walked out of the OR, I thought, there is the opening line to the new book. And then from there, it's all, okay, who would want to kill an 88-year-old, woman who supposedly just fell down her stairs at home, broke her hip, came into emergency. But, within an hour after Luke the transporter, leaves her, Helga is dead. So that's how the story began. And
it's a page turner because you have been so clever in how each chapter, when you get to the end of a chapter, you have no expectation about what's coming. And then all of a sudden, you've got some other really interesting thing happening.
Interesting development.
You did something unique in crowdsourcing in terms of getting this book written. Tell us about that.
Well, this is the second time I've done this, but I did a Kickstarter campaign.
Kickstarter, right.
And it was a $30. It was a 30-day campaign where people could basically pre-order the book. I know the book is written, I just haven't printed it up yet. So as a self-published author, one of the biggest costs that we have is obviously printing the book.
Yes.
Just the actual cost of getting the book printed. And now I have 30 cases of books wherever I store them. But it's a giant cost. So with this book, Abandon, and my last book, Lasting Impressions, we did a 30-day campaign and we raised money. The first time we raised $4,500 in pre-orders.
Wow.
In 30 days. And in this book, this time around, we raised almost $3,100 in the 30 days. So it's not people giving me money saying, "John, here's $100 because I think you're a great author." Yeah. It's people pre-ordering the book. So, I mean, that gives me a bit of a boost going, there is interest in this book that's taken me 2.25 years to get out to start to sell.
Well, I think it's a fascinating way to do it. And I think, as you said, especially, for self-published independent publishing, that this is a great way of getting the book out there up front. Now, you also did something else, and I want people to take a look at this first, and I'll come back and talk to you about it. Just watch this. So, John, that was really interesting. I don't know any other independent writer, or maybe it's just because I don't know another independent writer who's done it. But who's done it? Where did you decide, or how did you come up with this idea?
Well, a book trailer is something that I did for my first Steve Cassidy book 6 or 7 years ago, probably 8 years ago now. And it was one of those things. I have a background in television. I went through for television broadcasting. I worked in the industry at CHCH in Hamilton, and also different shows in Toronto and national shows. So I always had a visual. I would always be I always like to think I was the director and writer, not lighting, doing lighting or camera work. So I was always on the creative side. And to me, when book trailers started to come out, I just thought that would be a very fun and easy way to get the book out there. And it's a mini movie. I had 3 trailers for Abandon, and they're all just about a minute long. And at the end of it, you have the Kickstarter campaign is on now. But it just gives a little snapshot. Like people go to movies and pay $20 or $15 to go to a movie because they saw a commercial on TV that's 30 seconds or 1 minute long. And to me, it's an easy extension to do it with books.
Well, I think it's brilliant. There's so many other questions I could ask you about this, but the most important thing is, where can people get your books?
The books in the Windsor area, the new Abandoned book will be in all the independent bookstores as well as Chapters, and people can also get them signed copies off of my website, which is probably the easiest way to do it. Just at scannerpublishing.com.
Thank you so much. This has been terrific.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
I certainly did. So check out John's website and treat yourself to a very fine read. Well, Jody Raffoul is a well-known singer-songwriter from Leamington, Ontario. He's opened for some of the biggest names in rock music, including Kid Rock, Nickelback, Joe Cocker, the Allman Brothers Band, and Bon Jovi. Jody has been performing for over 20 years and usually performs over 200 shows a year. He was recently here in our studio with his friend and accompanist, Wes Buckley. They videotaped a number of songs. Here's Jody Raffoul now performing Simple Life.
Think the grass is greener on the other side. You're feeling like your life just passed you by, but that ain't so, girl. You can count your blessings. There's more to life than just fancy dressing. The sun's gonna rise and set in the same spot every day. I don't wanna live like the Joneses anyway. I'll take the simple life with you every day. 'Cause what we got, girl, think the grass is greener on the other side. Well, around here, baby, we ain't got nothing to hide. 'Cause our truth is everything. Baby, it's free. There ain't no one who can buy what's between you and me, girl. The sun's gonna rise and set in the same spot every day. I don't want to live like the Joneses anyway. I'll do the simple things with you every day. 'Cause what we got, girl, it's better than anything we'd ever want, and it's free, baby. Oh yeah, and it's something good, baby. Sun's gonna rise and set at the same spot every day. I don't want to live like the neighbors anyway. I'll do the simple things with you every day. 'Cause what we got, girl, oh yeah. Ooh. What we got is something good, baby.
That was Jody Raffoul. Try and catch one of his concerts when he's in town. I can tell you, you won't be disappointed. And did you notice how worn his guitar was? I thought that was really interesting. Apart from the fact that he's so talented. And now for a bit of horror with a rather lovely fellow. Windsor's Mick Ridgewell is one of the few writers in our region who writes horror novels. Mick has published 3 novels with the American company Samhain Publishing. Those books are The Night Crawler, Evil Never Dies, and Evil Unleashed. They all scared me half to death, but I have to tell you, they kept me reading. Now, he's decided to try something new and is switching genres. He's presently working on a non-scary book of fiction. Mick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to sort of talking to you about your latest book, which is quite a departure, I must say.
It is.
But tell us a bit about Mick Ridgewell.
Well, I'm a computer programmer on my day job at ArcelorMittal Windsor, which is a DeFasco child. I have 2 kids. One is at St. Clair College studying finance, and my daughter is just in her 2nd year of at the English department at the University of Windsor.
What do they think about I'm sure they've read your horror books.
Actually, no.
Oh, really?
My son doesn't read anything that doesn't have anything to do with money.
Oh.
And
Well, he's going to make you rich.
Hopefully. At least he makes himself rich enough to support himself
Yes.
someday. And my daughter is... she thinks it would be creepy to read something that her dad wrote. So.
Well, what made you start writing horror? I mean, you're a really nice guy.
It's what I did when I was a kid. I was when I watched movies, it was horror movies. When I watched television, it was Dark Shadows and The Twilight Zone and those kind of things. So.
Your books creep me out, but I mean, I couldn't put it down because they're really well done. How do you come up? I kept thinking, how does he come up with these creatures?
Well, with the vampire books, my wife and daughter were big fans of Vampire Diaries and the Twilight series, and although they're good enough stories, I always wanted vampires to be monsters.
You succeeded.
So that was my goal, was to put the monster back in vampires and take them out of the high schools and sparkling sunshine.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see any sparkling sunshine in these books, but forgive me, I wanted to let people hear this for a second. You have an extraordinary way with words. And when I was reading The Night Crawler, was this your first book?
That's Evil Never Dies.
Oh,
The
I'm sorry, not
Nightcrawler,
this one.
was
Yes,
my first book.
I'm reading the synopsis
Okay.
of
Yeah,
Nightcrawler.
The Nightcrawler was my first book. Yeah.
And you say here, his eyes followed a blonde wearing tight shorts until she disappeared from sight. Then he turned and walked directly into someone. He gave a half-hearted apology, not bothering to see whom he'd bumped into, not until the odor registered in his brain. It was the scent of decay, of mold or old newspapers decomposing in a wet basement. It was stink to an infinite degree. He looked at the dirtiest human he'd ever seen. I don't think I've ever heard a dirty human described quite like that.
Well, I wanted this man to be completely repulsive. And based on your reaction, hopefully I achieved that. This character who ran into the homeless man is a very stuck on himself individual. And so they're at complete opposite ends of the spectrum, and I wanted them to be as far from each other as I could accomplish.
Well, that certainly was the case, because two people couldn't be sort of, more far apart. What I also like about your books, the horror books, is that they have good endings. Like, evil doesn't triumph at the end. Is that something you deliberately do?
Usually I start out with an idea. For instance, in The Nightcrawler, I had this idea: what would happen if you were driving cross country and you saw the same person everywhere you went? And so I started with that small idea, and eventually, usually within the first 10,000 words, I come up with the end. And it's just a matter of trying to get from where I'm at to where I need to be. So no, I don't intentionally decide, okay, how am I going to end this happily? And there isn't a whole lot of happy in these books.
No.
But there has to be some.
But now, let's go to your new genre.
Okay.
Tell us about it.
Well, this is a book that I wrote for my wife, who is like you. She doesn't like to read horror. She did read The Nightcrawler only because it was the first thing I wrote, and she wanted to know what I was up to all those nights after we put the kids to bed. But it's not her thing. She said, well, I like the way you write, but I don't like what you write. So I was in Toronto and I picked up a book on lessons on writing. And the one lesson was write opening lines. And so I wrote this opening line that was, "He's dead." That was the opening line. And that opening line turned into 70,000 words of what you just read. So,
yes.
But it is, again, it's a book that I wrote for my wife, who doesn't like to read creepy stories.
Okay, so give us a synopsis.
I call it my big chill book. It's kind of like that story where you get a whole bunch of, in this case, 5 40-ish individuals who spend a weekend at a farm after the passing of one of their friends, and there just happens to be the deceased daughter joined into the group, and it turned out to be it's a series of flashbacks and events that happened current day that helped the daughter to learn who her father was, because she didn't grow up with him. He didn't even know he had a daughter until just weeks before his death. So it was a learning curve for her to find out who her dad was, and their goal at the end of the weekend was to come up with a plan on what to do with the deceased's ashes.
It was a very interesting study on relationships.
Well, there's some really weird relationships in this story. There's a man who, the only married couple in the group, and these two met when they were only 13 years old, and they're the only two that stayed together. So there's that, and then the other characters, for instance, the dead guy, although he was loved by them all, he wasn't really known by them all. For instance, they didn't know until he was dead that he had millions of dollars. That he was a whiz at the stock market and amassed this great fortune. There's one character who is kind of down and out. He's driving a clunky old car, and everybody else has some semblance of success. One guy is a womanizer who chases after young girls, and there's a lot of different people in this that are from completely different mindsets.
Is there a particular character that you liked in the group?
For me, the most fun character is Mary, who was...
She's outrageous.
I purposely made her this gregarious woman who is a few years older than the rest of the group, and she just kind of joined in because Davy, the deceased, had an infectious draw that people, once they met him, they had to be with him, right from when he was 13 years old. And so she kind of got herself into the group right from the get-go, and she's pretty hysterical. And the daughter, I like the way that she turned out as well.
I agree. I really like that character, Mary. So when is your book coming out?
Well, this one, I'm still in the editing phase. It's been sitting on my hard drive for years because once I got the Nightcrawler published, it was just easy to continue with the horror stuff. So I'd finished that manuscript, and then it sat on my hard drive for probably 6 or 7 years now. And I've talked to Dan Wells at Biblioasis, who's agreed to take a look at it when it's finished, and hopefully we'll find a home for it.
I really do hope that there's a home for it because I think the people would really enjoy meeting all those characters.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated this.
Thanks for having me.
Well, watch for the latest releases from Mick Ridgewell and John Schlarbaum. That's it for another edition of Scribes and Songsters. Thanks to our guests and thanks to Gary and Brian who make this all happen. But mostly thanks to you. Join me again, won't you? I'm Veronique Mandel.
Rise and set at the same spot every day. I don't want to live like the neighbors anyway. I'll do the simple things with you every day. Is what we got, girl. Oh yeah.